Hi, and welcome to another episode of Piano TV. So for today's video, I wanted to hop on over to the keyboard and look at some easy finger exercises for beginners. Because I had a request to do this kind of video, and I haven't done like a specific piano technique kind of video in a while. So I figured the technique exercise that I wanted to show you today is one that I show to all of my beginner students now, and that is how to play a pentascale. And penta just means five, so it's a 5-finger scale. I like doing pentascales as kind of like a starter technique exercise for a few reasons. One, they're pretty easy to learn, but depending on how coordinated you are, they can be maybe a little bit difficult to execute. I also like teaching them because they serve as like a launching pad for other music theory concepts. You kind of like, you're not just playing random notes, right? It kind of serves as like a gateway into other music theory concepts. So like in the next video, we're going to be talking about chords. And I feel like having a basis and an understanding of pentascales is going to be able to help you out with that next video and figuring out chords and stuff. So anyway, let's hop to it. Today we're going to do pentascales in every single major key. So since there are 12 keys on the piano, we're going to roll through all 12 major pentascales. So the first thing we have to do is figure out the formula for this 5-note scale. The easiest way to do that, I think, is to just write down the numbers 1 through 5, since there are 5 notes in the scale. And then we have to figure out where the half steps and the whole steps are. Just for a super quick refresher, a half step is the smallest distance between two notes. So a C to a C sharp is a half step, an E to an F, half step, G to G sharp, half step, and so on. So what a whole step is then is 2 half steps. So a whole step would be C to D, because half step, so 2 half steps. C to D is a half step. E to F sharp is, whole step. E to F sharp is a whole step, G to A is a whole step, and so on. So we've got our numbers 1 through 5 written out again here. So in a major pentascale, there is only going to be 1 half step, and the others are going to be whole steps. And this half step happens between, I'm going to write HS for half step. It happens between the 3rd and 4th note. So if we use the 5 letters of our old faithful key of C as an example, I'm just going to write down the first 5 letters of C. We're not going to worry about any sharps or flats yet, if there are any. So if we look through it, everything should be a whole step except for E to F, the 3rd and the 4th notes, which they are, because if you think about the keyboard, E to F is a half step. There's no black key in between them. C to D, D to E, F to G, all of those are going to be whole steps. So the C major pentascale doesn't need to have any sharps or flats added to it. It is perfect the way it is. So let's do another one. Let's do D flat major, just because, I don't know, maybe this one is a little bit less familiar. So I'm going to, again, write out all 5 letters. I'm going to start with a D flat because that's our starting note, but I'm not going to write any other flats on my way up. I'm just going to write the letter name. So we go D, E, F, G, A. I'm just doing like one letter at a time beside each other. So now we got to go through this and make sure all the distances are correct. So let's look at the first 2. So 1 to 2, this should be a whole step. D flat to E is actually larger than a whole step. If you, again, just like kind of visualize the keyboard, that would be a whole step plus a half step. So we got to take this E down a peg to E flat. Now D flat to E flat, that's a whole step, we're good. So let's look at 2 and 3, we need another whole step. E flat to F, think about the keyboard, there's no black key in the middle there, so that is a whole step, we don't need to change anything. But F to G is a whole step, and this is the problem, we need it to be a half step. So we can't change this F. This F is gonna like affect the E flat, so this is like untouchable now. What we can do is lower the G to a G flat. F to G flat, now we have a half step. But G flat to A is a really big jump, it's bigger than a whole step, so we gotta take that down a peg as well. So now we have our D flat major pentascale. So now we are going to hop over to the keyboard and play through some of these so you can get a feel for what they sound like and what they look like to play and so on. So here's what a C major, and then I'll do D flat major also. Here's what the pentascales sound like. So you probably noticed they basically sound identical, and the only difference between them is that you start on a different note. The C pentascale starts on C, the D flat pentascale starts on D flat, and so on. So this is entirely dependent on how developed your ear is, but it can actually be easier to figure out the notes of the 12 different pentascales by ear, because once you have an idea of what the overall sound is, you can kind of figure it out starting on different notes just by sort of trial and error. Maybe you do this and it doesn't sound quite right. So you realize, okay, we need to make a change there. But if you can't figure them out by ear, it's one of those things that does take some training, but some people just seem to be like pretty quick and natural at it. But don't worry if you can't, and you can just use the formula, or I mean, as a last case scenario, you can Google the pentascales. But I will note that you'll remember them better if you manually figure them out yourself. So here's the part where we turn it into a finger exercise. So first of all, every single pentascale is going to be played with this finger pattern: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So really, really easy. Doesn't matter if you start on C or if you start like on A flat or like B, or same thing in the left hand: 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. So it's going to just be like using all 5 fingers going up and then going down. The first thing I do with these is figure it out hands separate. So maybe you want to start with the right hand and slowly. Once you can do them all slowly, maybe about there, you can start speeding them up. And so on. And once you can do that in the right hand, then maybe move on to the left hand, do the same thing. And I would say once you can play it about that speed with precision, then you're ready to start hands together. And I just want to make a note. Sometimes I have students come to class and they're like, look at my super fast pentascale. And they play like this, where it's just like some of the notes end up mushing together. You want to really make sure that you can create like a very precise differentiation instead of like a kind of like a roll. There's a big difference. If you're not sure, record yourself playing it and you should be able to hear it. So anyway, once you can do it hands separate, then it's time to put it together. Again, you start slow. And once you've got it slow, you can start speeding up. And the goal is to be able to roll through them all without too much hesitation or thought. And once you can do that, I think you can move on to more difficult things, but I think this is a really effective finger exercise just on its own. It really only takes a minute to play, but it's a good little warm-up and exercise, especially if you're a beginner. And it's really helpful from a music theory standpoint as well, because it's going to help you just like, without even really trying, you'll start to internalize the different like sharps and flats in the various keys. Pentascales don't take a long time to master either. Like even if you're an absolute beginner, if you spend a few minutes a day on pentascales, then I pretty much guarantee it'll take you less than a month to be able to play them all hands together with relative competency. What I also really like about doing pentascales as a warm-up is they force you to work on the relatively weak fingers. So usually it's finger 4 and finger 5 that are like kind of lame compared to the other ones. So if you're doing, say you're doing like a full scale and you're doing, I don't know, like a 4-octave scale, and there's 29 notes in a 4-octave scale, you're actually only going to use your pinky once. Whereas with a 5-note scale where you're playing like 5 notes, you're going to use your pinky once. So you just proportionally use your pinky and like the outer fingers so much more, because full major scales will mainly just like work the first 3, which is really, really good. These are the ones you're going to use the most anyway, but I feel like it's good to start developing coordination with these outer fingers, and pentascales are good for that. And for those of you who have been playing for a little while, this might seem like a really, really simple elementary exercise, and you can probably learn it in a day or two, but I urge you to give it a try and just test your knowledge of different key signatures, and test your, especially like your left hand finger 4 and 5, where things get a little sticky sometimes. See how your technique is. Anywho, thank you for watching this, what I assume will be a relatively short video, and I will be back in the next video talking and building on this information, where we're going to talk about like chord theory stuff. It'll be lots of fun. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you next time. The